Mongolia is 99% empty. You see, despite being the 18th largest country by land area, it has a population of just 3.5 million people, making it the most sparsely populated country on Earth. And a decade ago, only 1 in 4 people here had internet access, and yet they produced the greatest Counter-Strike team Asia has ever seen. But how did a country like Mongolia become so good at Counter-Strike? Is there something in the water, or are they just built different? Well, to find out, we have to go back to the early 2000s, because Mongolian Counter-Strike didn't start with the internet, it started without it. In the early 2000s, most PC cafes in Ulaanbaatar, Mongolia's capital, had either extremely limited and slow internet connections. What little connection existed was expensive, not the kind of thing a teenager with spare change could burn through for hours every afternoon, so online gaming wasn't really an option. What you could do, however, was play on a local area network, and the best competitive game to play in a LAN environment was a little 5v5 tactical shooter called Counter-Strike 1.6, the game that ran on almost any machine. Counter-Strike was the game that fit the infrastructure Mongolia actually had. Now, if that sounds familiar, it should. Korea built the greatest esports infrastructure on the planet inside PC bongs, dense, cheap, social gaming spaces where teenagers would pile in after school, play the same games because those were the only ones installed, and grind against each other for hours. Mongolia had unknowingly recreated the same environment. Internet cafes in Ulaanbaatar were Mongolia's PC bongs, a warm gathering place in a city that hits -30 in the winter. Teenagers were nowhere else to go. Through the 2000s and early 2010s, as more households and cafes got connected to the internet, Counter-Strike continued to be the country's go-to FPS game. And out of this LAN cafe culture came the first 2 Mongolian players to go professional, Zuckerberg and Machine Gun, 2 mechanically strong riflers who interestingly both started their professional careers not in Mongolia, but in India. Zuckerberg and Machine Gun were the clear carries of their Indian rosters, basically just shooting harder than their competition. And after a year, Zuckerberg had enough of putting India on his back, so he went home and gathered Mongolian talent, and he built something that had never existed before, a full Mongolian roster, uniting Zuckerberg and Machine Gun alongside Sogo, NCL, and Menace. And most importantly, they had a coach, former 1.6 player Mara, who would play a massive role in the team's success. This roster would play under the moniker that would eventually become the most recognized in Asian Counter-Strike, the Mongols, and this group's breakout moment came when they qualified for IEM Taipei 2016. The field at IEM Taipei was the best Asia and Oceania had to offer, all battling for a spot at the MLG Columbus Major qualifier and an invite to IEM Katowice. And sitting at the top of the field were the Renegades, a squad of Aussies that were the clear-cut best team in the entire Eastern Hemisphere, a team that would usually skill lift these Asian teams on their way through these regional qualifiers. The Mongols upset the Renegades in the best-of-1 group stage, scoring their biggest scalp since the roster was assembled. But the Mongols weren't done. They fought their way through the bracket, and in the grand final, they met the Renegades again, this time in a best-of-3, and what followed was not a close match. The Mongols smashed the Aussies through sheer firepower, 16-9 on Cobblestone and 16-2 on Inferno, with Machine Gun going nuclear, going 24-10 and a 1.9 rating.
I'm so exciting actually. Also I'm so proud of my team. I wanna tell him our coach, but he isn't here. But he also made a lot of tactics, and he decided that a lot of things. His name is Mara, actually. Maybe he will watch this movie. Yeah. Thanks a lot.
This was a massive statement win, and the Mongols lifted the IEM Taipei trophy. Speaking of trophies, Team Vitality has won a few of those recently, and they are sponsored by Skinland, who also happen to be this video's sponsor. If you're looking to upgrade your inventory, you should check out Skinland, because with their new payout system, you can cash out instantly, despite the annoying Steam Trade Protection update. And when you sell, don't forget to use code RETAKE for an extra $10 on your $100 sale. And with the price of skins right now, it's the perfect time to cop a new knife and glove combo. Thank you to Skinland for sponsoring this video. In the grand scheme of international Counter-Strike, IEM Taipei was a small tournament, but little did they know lifting that trophy would change the course of Mongolian Counter-Strike forever. Cause before Taipei, the conversation around esports Mongolia was almost universally negative. The mainstream viewed it as an addiction. Kids were wasting their youth spending countless hours in internet cafes grinding CS. But it all flipped with this IEM Taipei victory. Mainstream Mongolian media didn't just cover it, they celebrated it. Studios were inviting Zuckerberg and Machine Gun in for interviews. This positive shift in perception is impossible to overstate, because talent had always been in these Mongolian internet cafes, but now they saw what was possible. And a generation of kids, aged 12 and 13 at the time, watched the trophy being lifted on the international stage and made a decision that this was something they wanted to pursue. The seeds had been planted, but it would still be a while until they blossomed. And in the meantime, the high of IM Taipei didn't last long. In fact, the very next thing that happened to the Mongols might be the most gutting moment in the entire history of Asian Counter-Strike. The Mongols were denied their United States visas, so their chance to participate at the first $1 million major at MLG Columbus went up in dust. A massive setback, especially since the players weren't getting a salary. And in fact, the team's manager revealed he was personally supporting the team financially.
Right now, we don't have any sponsors. We don't have any salary. To be honest, I'm paying all of the stuff.
The Mongols did make it to IM Katowice though, and got their first real taste of European Counter-Strike at the top level. And they got cooked. It was Coughing Baby versus Hydrogen Bomb. The Mongols had no chance and went 0-5, coming dead last in the group and failed to break even double-digit rounds in any game. The all-aim, no-brain brand of CS didn't work against these tier 1 teams in Katowice who had been playing structured, utility-heavy, systemized Counter-Strike for years. Still though, the Mongols proved their mechanical prowess with insane plays like these.
Finds Stewie, but no, Stewie will get the better of him. It's up to Sugu again to try and clutch this. He's got 2 kills in very quick fashion, but he has been pincered. However, that 3rd kill brings it down to an even 1v1, and it's Tarek looking to clutch, but he won't do it. Sugu comes out with a massive play for the Mongols.
But the team was in a decline and wasn't able to recreate their magic from Taipei, thus bombed out of the following PGL minor, and it was during this time that Machine Gun was poached and sent to North America. OG NACS fans may remember an organization called Splice, and they were assembling an experimental roster from across the world, and planned to have Machine Gun, a 26-year-old talent who had never been outside of Asia, as the firepower centerpiece of this international experiment. The experiment was a disaster, only lasting 2 months, with the Mongolian star averaging an abysmal 0.87 rating. It was clear Machine Gun had mechanical skill, but the lack of team cohesion and a massive communication gap meant he didn't yet have the environment to show off his skills. And back in Mongolia, without Machine Gun, the Mongols tried to rebuild and surround pieces around Zilkenberg, but to no avail. And this is where the lack of infrastructure really started to show. New players rotated in and out, results stayed flat, and that spark that had ignited Taipei was proving almost impossible to recreate. And then, by 2019, the moment that had truly signaled the end of an era arrived. Zilkenberg, the face of Mongolian Counter-Strike, a player who had started it all in India, the man who had come home, built a team from nothing, and lifted a trophy in Taipei, stepped away from the Mongols. Just like that, both founders were gone. The name that changed the course of esports in an entire country quietly faded from relevancy. By 2019, the Mongols was no more, and its existence faded into obscurity. But something was quietly brewing within Mongolia. Remember those little kids? The ones who had watched Zilkenberg and Machine Gun lift that trophy at Taipei in 2016. They had spent the past 3 years grinding the game and getting better, and they were cropping up with tons of interesting young talents like Score, Blitz, and Annihilation, to name a few. But there was a problem. Talent without infrastructure is just potential, and Mongolia didn't have the ecosystem to take these players from cracked aimers in the local scene to well-rounded Counter-Strike professionals. That's where one man changes everything.
Hello, my name is Kay. I'm from Mongolia, and I'm the founder of Meta.
Kay is the most prominent Mongolian esports figure that had been covering the Asian scene, and specifically Mongolian CS, for years. But in 2019, he did something that went far beyond commentary. Through his organization Meta Gaming, Kay brought tournaments and partnered with Faceit to establish the Meta Hub, a dedicated Mongolian Faceit server built specifically for local players. For context, before this, Mongolian players who wanted to play on international servers had to play with ridiculously high ping, and the Meta Hub fixed that. For the first time, Mongolian players had their own dedicated servers, and what that created almost immediately was a genuine ecosystem. The best young players in Ulaanbaatar were now playing each other in a competitive environment that actually reflected their real level. The cafes had always had the talent, but now there was a system to surface it.
Actually, there's a lot of people playing CS in Mongolia right now. Like, there's so many like young and up and coming kids, and yeah, there's just so many talents right now. And I'm actually glad that it's happening with our country, with the CS as well.
And the system was working. Every single one of the players who would go on to become the modern Mongols, Senzu, 910, Techno, Mizinho, and Blitz, joined the Meta Hub and hit Faceit level 10 within just a few months of playing on it. The Meta Hub was the catalyst to the wave of talent that was about to come out of Mongolia. The seeds that IM Taipei had planted were starting to blossom, and the infrastructure Kay had built was the sunlight that finally let them grow. And somewhere in Ulaanbaatar, Mara was watching all of it, taking notes. While Kay was building the infrastructure, Mara had the vision of building a Mongolian roster and taking them to new heights. Remember Mara? He was the coach coach of the original Taipei winning Mongols. And now with a new generation of talent emerging from the meta hub and the local scene, he finally had the players he needed, and two of them stood out immediately. He started to work with Checkmate's 18-year-old in-game leader, Blitz, a 2100 rated FIDE chess master, tactician who was not only a genius but a demon on the server, and alongside him, a literal child named Techno 4K, who became the youngest player ever to play at a Valve-sponsored event at just 15 years old. Mara now had two strong foundational players, mechanically strong IGL and support player, and he surrounded them with two of the best Mongolian fraggers in Score and Cabal, and 9 picked up the op. And for the first time in Mongolian Counter-Strike, this team had proper structure, a system that could compete internationally, not just mechanically outgun their regional opponents. The lineup was picked up by IHC Esports, and now with real organizational support, the results came fast. IHC began cutting through the Asian circuit in a way nobody had seen before from a Mongolian team. They still had the aggressive Asian DNA, but now it had structure. And then came the PGL Major Antwerp qualifier. IHC 2-0'd the previous major representatives and the best Asian team in Tailu, and also 2-0'd the Renegades en route to becoming the first Mongolian roster to ever qualify for a major. Mongolian Counter-Strike has arrived on the world stage, and unlike every Asian team that had come before them, they weren't going anywhere. The core would establish themselves as the best team in Asia, qualifying for IEM Rio 6 months later and their second major in a row. And in 2023, they dropped the IHC tag and took back the name that started it all, the Mongols. And there's no better way to pay homage to the legendary team name than to qualify for their third major in a row and get the Mongols logo officially into the game. But despite being the best team in Asia, the Mongols had exited the last 3 majors with a 1-3 record. They were still just bottom feeders against top European competition, and the concern was real. We've seen this story before. An Asian team builds momentum, gets their stickers, makes their majors, and then quietly becomes a team that everyone knows will exit into groups. And it looked like Mongolia had hit their ceiling, but that's not what happened. And the reason comes down to one thing: Mara's willingness to make drastic roster moves, giving chances to young players. Mara had been no stranger to making moves that on paper didn't make sense. He previously replaced the team's top-rated player, Score, and at the time regarded as the best Mongolian player and favored for a better fit. And after the Paris major, he replaced 2 known quantities in Bartak and Annihilation. Annihilation was the best op talent Mongolia had ever produced. Some had him as the best player on the team, full stop. And he replaced them with 2 players nobody had ever heard of. Mizinho was Bartak's 15-year-old little brother, who had 0 matches on HLTV, and 910, an opper who only had 3,000 hours in Counter-Strike. The community reacted poorly, and at this point, people thought Mara had completely lost the plot. He would also eventually sign a 17-year-old delinquent in Senzu, who was talented but had recently gotten into trouble for gambling a teammate's skins away. But Mara had a vision. He saw how other national teams like France and Sweden, and how ancestral roster moves that was recycling the same known quantities greatly neutered the scene and upcoming talent. And it turned out Mara knew exactly what he was doing. The lineup of Blitz, Techno, 910, Mizinho, and Senzu would go on to become the best team Asia has ever seen. Throughout 2024 and 2025, the Mongols became a mainstay at big event playoffs, a genuine dark horse at every event they entered. The individual performances started getting recognized too. 910 and Techno were awarded MVPs at Yala Compass and EWC respectively, and Senzu, the delinquent that Mara took a chance on, blossomed into a star and finished 2025 as the 13th best player in the world on the HLTV Top 20. The 13th best player on the planet from a country that a decade ago had 1 in 4 people with internet access. But nothing captured what this team had become better than what happened at the Blast TV Austin Major. The Mongols arrived in Austin having already made 1 major playoff run, but to make the playoffs again, they had to beat G2 in the 2-2 series, and the map is G2's pick of Dust 2. What followed was one of the most extraordinary maps in major history. The map goes to overtime thanks to a hard carry from Senzu with 36 frags in regulation. Then overtime 2 and 3 and 4 and 5. 5 overtimes, 53 rounds, absolute cinema. And in the middle of it all, Senzu, the kid Mara gave a second chance to, shook off his playoff demons and rose to the occasion. He finished the map dropping 56 kills, the highest kill count ever recorded on a single map in major history. And the Mongols come out on top and are through to the playoffs. And they carried that momentum straight onto the stage. They swiftly 2-0 FaZe in the quarters and 2-0 Pain in the semis. 910 is on fire, sporting the highest rating in the playoffs heading into the grand finals. And with that, the Mongols make history, becoming the first Asian team to make the grand final of a major. The Mongols take on Vitality, and map 1 is Mirage, with 9-10 keeping his playoff form rolling and opens the game with an op ace that sets the tone immediately, and the Mongols storm through the map with a dominant 13-5 victory. And in that moment, it genuinely felt like they were gonna do it. A team that just a few years ago was ecstatic to even be there, were one map away from lifting the biggest trophy in Counter-Strike. It felt like we were about to get the good ending, but Vitality locked in, and the championship experience was too much, as they swiftly reverse swept the young Mongol squad to stifle the feel-good fairy tale ending. But here's the thing, although the Mongols weren't able to win the major, coming in second place was still a valiant attempt, and Mara's vision was realized. Everything he had built toward the infrastructure, the philosophy and willingness to cut players the community loved and replace them with kids nobody had heard of, had produced a team good enough to play on Counter-Strike's biggest stage. And off the back of that major run, combined with the EWC victory, the HLTV rankings had the Mongols as the #1 team in the world. But the story doesn't stop there. Fast forward to 2026, Mara is forced to go back to the well. Senzu and Mazinho are poached by BC Game, and in their place, more teenagers, Tikuak and Darkmeister, are called up. New names, but the same doubt from the community. And look, this time the concern feels more real than usual. Senzu was the 13th best player in the world, and Mazinho was one of the most reliable sharpshooting anchors. The Mongols is back to square one, but so far, every time Mara reached into the unknown, he came back with new exciting talents. And the reason he can keep doing it, the reason this well never runs dry, is the same reason this whole story was possible in the first place. Mongolia is one of the youngest countries on the planet. The median age of the country is about 27, and nearly a third of the entire population is under 15 years old. And with half the country living in Ulaanbaatar, there's always going to be a pipeline of talent, and that's why Mongolians are so good at Counter-Strike. It's not just one thing, but all these factors together. A LAN Counter-Strike culture built into the country, 2 players who went abroad and proved Counter-Strike esports was a real path, K who built the infrastructure and tournaments to surface the talent, and a coach with a vision who was able to nurture and put it all together to achieve big things. So heading into 2026, Mongolian CS looks like it's fractured, and it's looking doubtful that they'll achieve the peaks that they did like in the summer of 2025. But I trust Mara and the Mongols' ability to rebuild into a contending team, and also looking forward to seeing Mazinho and Senzu on an international team. Because if history has taught us anything about Mongolian Counter-Strike, it's that every time you think the story is over, they always find a way to impress. So maybe a Mongolian team or player will lift a major trophy in the future, who knows? If you liked the video, please remember to like and comment. Thanks.